Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Peter Evans if you're new here. So in today's video, we shall be talking about the Angular front-end development. Since now most of whatever we needed in our backend, we've actually tackled them in this users playlist. So we proceed with the newly updated Angular 17. So in this tutorial, we shall tackle the registration, the logging in, and also the logging out aspects of our users app. So without wasting much more time, let's jump straight into VS Code. So over here, we have our project open and ready for us to explore. So if you remember from the previous tutorials where I was actually doing the front end, there were lots of folders, but for now, I've actually redacted all of them. And now I want to give this whole Angular 17 development a fresh and a new look. So now we have these two folders, that is the shared as well as also the users. So the users is where we shall now have the logic for whatever we have in this our new tutorial. So inside this folder, the users folder over here, we have a couple of files. That is now the users.module.ts, the users interface, as well as also the users routing module. So somebody might be wondering what this actually means. So the users module over here, what you're seeing over here, is just an equivalent of whatever Angular gives you if you generate a new project, that is the app module. So the difference is that this is now the main module, but this shall be like some sort of feature modules. We can call them like some sort of apps inside our Django application. So the users module over here, let me just open it, sorry. The users module over here, you can see it over here, is decorated with the ng module. So here is where we now have the entry point of all those components that we shall actually have grouped inside this module. So the concept of module is quite synonymous with the Angular. It's some sort of grouping together components with related functionality. Like in this case, we have the registration component, the login component, as well as also the logout component. You already understand that these components have some sort of relationship due to things like authentication. So that's it for whatever we have to specify for our module.ts in order to group whatever components that we have inside it. Then we also have this custom file, that is the user's interface here. So here is where I've actually defined the shape of the objects that we shall be using inside the components or maybe services in our users module inside this folder over here. Like in this case, the very first interface over here. So we are having the user registration data, that is the username, the password, the first name, the last name, the phone number, as well as also the sex, which is also a string. So what's happening over here is that we shall ensure that in order to register a user, all of these things must be supplied. So that is the shape of the user registration data object. Same thing applies to the registration response. You can see even for the login response, we also expect an out token that is actually a string. Then anywhere where we apply the shape of the user profile, we are actually sure that all this other stuff shall be availed. So that's it for whatever we have in our objects that we shall be using in this users app for now, or maybe users module, sorry, for now. So inside our routing, users routing here, we have three routes for now, that is the register, the login, as well as also the logout. So you can think of this users routing module.ts as some sort of the urls.py for our Django backend. They're just quite similar. You can see we have the path, then we have the component that is actually being initialized. So this is like some sort of an equivalent of a view set. And then we have some specifications like they can activate. So these are custom specifications for this URL to ensure that we perform things like guarding the URL, with respect to whatever is defined in this, let's say in this function of the registration guard. Then we are also now naming the URL over there. I'll explain more about this in just a couple of minutes. Same thing applies to the login as well as also the logout. And then now our user routing module is actually decorated with also the ng module to ensure that the routes that are inside here are actually specified as a child route. So this shall tell the Angular application that we have the, okay, let me just proceed over here. We have the main routes. Sorry, let me just head over to the app routing. Yeah, okay, we have the main routes that is defined by the for routes, as well as also the routes that are inside our users module over here. So all of those routes shall be actually registered. So back to our users routing module. So that's it. wherever we import this users routing module over there, everything shall be actually availed. And then now inside our components over here, we have the login, logout, as well as also the registration. But for now, I won't actually go through them. I'll just quickly jump over to the shared folder over here. So inside our shared folder over here, we have the three files, the authguard, the auth-interceptor, as well as also the authservice.ts. So starting over with the authservice.ts over here, quickly running through it, we have this authservice that is actually decorated with an injectable, which is specified to be provided in root. So this basically means that we can be able to use this out service anywhere within our Angular application. And then inside our service, we have some constant URLs, that is the base URL, the login URL, the logout URL, as well as also the userme URL. So before I even proceed to talk more about the out service over here, I'll just quickly jump over to the Djoser page, since it's Djoser that we are using for authentication, in order for you to understand in a much more clearer way in which the authentication really works. So we shall jump over to the Chrome. Over here I've actually opened the Djoser page where they are actually displaying how to use Djoser. Okay, now in order to register a new user, we actually send a post request with the request payload, that is the username, the password, and many more. Since for us we have some other fields as well, those ones shall also be specified as we've done in the user registration data object. We then expect a response object of this kind that has some sort of an email, the username, the sex, and stuff of that kind, since our user has actually more fields than whatever is actually displayed over here. And then now, after doing so, we actually try accessing this endpoint, the user/me. Then if you do not have the authentication credentials, then we shall actually have this raised. If we try now logging in the user using the correct details, that is now the username and the password, then the response for this login shall be an object of the auth token key, and the value shall be this long string over here. Then if we attempt again trying to access this URL/user/me, then we shall get the detailed authentication credentials were not provided. But then if we try accessing the same URL with the authorization header attached to it, you can see over here, we're attaching the authorization with this token over here that we received after we logged in. Then we again receive now the user profile. So we know that in order to actually access this URL over here, we have to avail the authorization header. And then now we can as well now try logging out to this endpoint, the /logout with the authorization header, that is the same token. And then if we log out and try now actually accessing the /user/me with the same token, we shall get the invalid token. This means that whenever we log out, the token is actually being invalidated. And now that we understand the flow of the login and the logout as provided by the package Djoser, now we are back into our out service over here. So we also inject these two properties, that is now the HTTP client, and the router 2 is injected over here to allow us perform things like navigation after some process actually occur. And so since Angular 16, there was an introduction of the signals. So signals are more or less just behavior subjects that are a little bit easier to work with. So we have the signals, the eFarm owner, the eFarm manager, the assistant farm manager, as well as also the eFarm worker, that are all set to false. So inside our out service, we have these methods, starting with the register user over here. So our register user actually accepts the user data in the shape of the user registration data, and then it returns a promise of a string. So we first of all try if we can send a post request to this base URL with the request payload of the user data, and then we expect to have some sort of a response in the shape registration response. By the way, you have to know that these HTTP requests actually return observables, and that's the reason why I'm actually wrapping it inside the first value from in order to convert the response to a promise, because we don't really have to wait for a lot of stuff. I mean, there's nothing like some streaming data where it's just a one-time response. So just working with promises makes things a little bit easier. So whenever we actually perform the registration, then we are sure that we shall get a response object which actually has that user profile as we had already seen. So inside that, we are now constructing a welcome message over here. So let's assume that it's me who actually registered for the first time. It will be some sort of welcome Evans to Peter's farms. So we shall be returning that welcome message, and then now if there's some problem that actually occurred during the registration over here, then we shall throw that error. And now we as well have the login method over here that actually accepts the user login data in the shape of the login data, and it also returns the promise of the string type. So we first of all try logging in the user by sending a post request to this login URL with the request payload of the user's login in data. And then since after logging in, we expect that out token. So let me just take you back a little bit again. If the user logs in, okay, if the user logs in, then we get something like this. So it's an object with the key out token. So just back in our VS Code over here. Yes, here. Now we know that this is now the out token that is actually being returned. So we are utilizing the local storage. So set this out token inside our browser for it to be easier for our users. Note that each and every time that they want to access maybe some sort of a link, they have to log in first of all and do. So this one is avoiding the repeated logins and making the user experience to be much more better. So we shall be storing this token in the browser so that subsequent requests are being validated based on this token that is actually stored here. And then now, if there's, let's say, a problem, then we shall be propagating this error, an error occurred during login, please try again. And then now, we also have another method, that is the logout method that now returns a promise of a void type. Of course, it makes sense. After logging out, there's nothing that we are expecting in return. Okay, so we send a post request to the login URL, the logout URL with nothing, of course. And then now, after everything is resolved over there, we shall actually go ahead and then now remove the token from the browser because this person is actually logging out. And then now we reset the signals. So I've not actually introduced this, so I'll just pause a little bit from this point and then now go ahead and explain the method, the reset signals. So inside our service, the out service, we have these two helper methods, that is the set signals as well as also the reset signals. So the set signals actually takes in the user profile object, and then of course it does not return anything. What it does is that it just goes ahead and then sets these signals, that is the farm owner, the farm manager, the assistant farm manager, as well as also the farm worker to either true or false with regards to whatever we have inside our user profile over here. So basically what happens is that our user profile returns the, okay, let me just go back. As you can see, yeah, we have the isFarm owner, which is a Boolean type, of course. So if it's true, then what it means is that that isFarm owner shall also be set to true. I hope now you understand the rationale over there. And then we have the reset signals over here that actually goes ahead and then resets everything. So basically, that is what we are using inside our logout method over here, where after removing the token, we ensure that all those other signals, if it was actually set to true, any of them, they are all now defaulted back to false. And then now we redirect the user back to the login page. If there was some error during this HTTP request over here, then we shall propagate an error occurred during the logout, please try again. And then finally, in this our out service, we have this verify token that also returns a promise of the Boolean type. So we first of all try if we now can get the user profile from this, the user me URL. I hope now you understand from whatever I've actually explained that this is the URL that actually now returns the user profile. So if the user profile is an instance of an object, of course, the object that is being returned by the user profile has the shape of all this stuff, like the first name, the last name, and stuff of that kind. So if that's the case, then we know that, okay, an object has been returned. Then we also go ahead and now check if the response, maybe that object actually has an ID, because this now makes it certain that the user has been retrieved from the, or maybe the user has actually been gotten from the database. So we shall set the signals with regards to whatever we have in our response profile. You can see that the response here is of the type user profile, because that is what we are expecting back. And if it's that way, then just like I have explained over here, if the person is flagged as a farm owner, that will be true. farm manager, that will be true, and so on. So if that's the case, then that's what will happen there, and then our execution shall stop from this point where our verified token shall return true. But if the response does not really have an ID, means that there's something that has actually happened, we shall remove the token which was in our actually inside our browser, and then now reset all these signals and then return false. But if maybe there was a problem, or maybe the response was not an instance of an object, shall just do the same thing, remove the token, reset the signals, return false. If there was a problem with this HTTP request, do the same thing, just reset the signals, then return to false. So that's it for whatever we have in our out service over there. Then now inside our out interceptor over here, so the concept of interceptor, if you are maybe new to Angular, is some sort of a middleware equivalent to Django. Actually, it accesses the request before either to the server or maybe from the server. So that is what is actually happening over here. So our out interceptor actually implements the HTTP interceptor, where we now override the intercept method inside here. So the intercept method takes in two parameters, that is HTTP request object as well as also the HTTP handler, and then it returns an observable. So what we shall be doing is that if there is this token inside our local storage, we shall be retrieving it and then cloning the request to set the authorization header with the token as the key, then the token now as the value. I hope you understand. By the way, the request is actually immutable, so we cannot actually change it. We can only just clone it. So that's the reason why we're actually doing this. We're just cloning it if the token was actually available, because there are some cases where this interceptor shall be actually initialized, but let's take for example during registration or maybe accessing the register page, the token is not there, so it shall just return the plain request as it was. And then inside our out guard over here, we have a couple of methods. For example, the registration guard over here. So our registration guard actually injects the out service because we shall be using it, as well as also the router. So we shall be using the out service method verify token to ensure that if this person is actually logged in, then we shall redirect the person to the logout page and then returns this as false. So we shall restrict that our registration page. I told you about the users routing module over here. Yeah, you can see we are applying the method registration guard. So that already tells you that whenever the user is already authenticated, there is no need of actually accessing that URL. I know it makes a lot of sense even for you as well, but if the person is not authenticated, if this one is actually false, remember our verified token returns a promise of the boolean type here, that true or false. So if it's actually false, then we shall return true, meaning that further processing of whatever the request or maybe that URL was actually to be accessed, in this case it will be the register, shall be processed. Same thing applies to the login guard, the logout guard, even the farm owner guard. So in this farm owner guard, there's a little bit of tweaking where now we are adding the farm owner signal check over here, where now we ensure that if the user is actually logged in, maybe authenticated, as well as also the user is a farm owner, then we return true, meaning that now further processing shall be carried out. But if not, we shall now redirect the user to the logout page. So for now, it's just the logout page because that is whatever we have. But in future, as I increase or maybe add some other URLs and stuff of that kind, I will also now redirect them to very most appropriate URL. So you see, in this case, it will now return false. So all these others actually operate on the same principle. Now that we've talked about whatever we have in our shared folder, now it's time to go and now explain about, I'll only talk about the login component because the two, the logout and the registration, they just operate on the similar principle. So our logout component over here, it's implementing the onInit method, that is now the ng onInit. So first up, our login component is decorated with the @component decorator. And by the way, right now, if you try doing the ng generate component, maybe the name, whatever name that you want to have there, it shall have an additional something called the standalone over here, and it will tell you maybe if it's true or not. But this one is really not appropriate for me, or maybe in this case, because we want to group together the functionalities of the login, the logout, and the registration together within the users module. So that's the reason why I actually redacted this one out. So our login component is actually specifying the login form property that is tightly coupled with the form group. So this one shall enable us to construct and also bind our login form with the ng model and stuff of that kind. So it will be much more easier to manage our forms. Then now inside our login component, we are also injecting the form builder. This one shall help us now building the fields inside our form. We are also injecting the out service. This one shall enable us to ensure that a component is only accessed if maybe there's some authentication that is actually fulfilled or stuff of that kind. Then we also have the snack bar. So the mat snack bar over here actually ensures that now we have the toasters. I know we can use some other packages, but since this whole project is actually tightly coupled with the Angular, I'm using the mat snack bar from the Angular material. And then now we also have the route over here that shall also enable us to navigate or maybe just redirect to other pages. So whenever our component is actually being called or maybe initialized, we want to ensure that the form is actually availed, the login form that is. And our login form has only two fields, that is the username as well as also the password. They're actually empty by default, but they are required. And then now inside our ng on init, since we've actually implemented the on init here, we also ensure that we perform some verification where if the user is already verified, you can see the same thing just applies to whatever you have in our outguard. So if the user is already authenticated, then we'll redirect the user to the logout page. That is what we have for now, but in future I'll also now have, let's say, home page or maybe stuff of that kind. Then we now have the success toast of the already logged in. So you might be wondering where this success toast comes from. So just hold on, I'll quickly explain whatever it does. Maybe if now the user is not authenticated, then now we shall also now just allow the person to access the login URL. So I know somebody might be wondering, but Peter, why is it that you've actually implemented this ng on init over here, yet you already have an out guard for this URL that is invoking this login component? So this is just for like learning purposes for somebody to understand how these things really work. But then I'll also now decide to remove this in future. And then now, inside our own login method over here, we are actually ensuring that the form is valid. So the form is only valid. Let me just collapse this. The form is valid whenever these fields have some populated data in them. So if the form is valid, and then now we extract the data that is within the forms, that is now the value of the fields, and then now we send them to the login method of the out service. You see, we have the user login data here. Yeah, that is what we are actually extracting and storing over in this variable user login data from the form. We send that, and then since we know that if a person logs in, then there's the token that is actually returned. So if we have that token, we redirect the user to the logout page, as well as also now show a success toast of login successful. So at this point, just excuse me, I'll explain about this success toast over here. Yes, you can see we have the success toast over here. So this is just a method that accepts a single parameter that is of the message that is actually of type string. So our injected snack bar has the open method here, taking in these parameters, that is a message, that is a must, the action, that is now the close for our case, as well as also some configurations, that is now the duration over here. We shall have the snack bar success toast last about 3 seconds. Then same thing just applies for the show error toast, as well as also the handle login error message, where we are only accessing the show error toast with a message that is passed into it. And then now that is the operational principle of those methods. So you can see over here, by the way, now we shall be showing the success toast. You can see inside our success toast, we're only accepting just a single method, that is the message. And that's what's really happening over here. That is the message that we are passing. The rest are already predefined. So we do that, and then if there is an error, we shall raise the incorrect login credentials, please try again. And then in cases where there is no token, we shall raise the login fail, please try again, as well as also if the login form is actually not valid, we raise the please fill in all required fields. So that's it for our login component. Just quickly touching over to our component here, you can see, so if you are new to the Angular material, I'm using the Angular Materials card, header, and stuff of that kind. So you can see over here, our login form. Let me just click on here. Our login form is actually tightly bound to the form group. So this makes it easy for our component to communicate with our HTML. And then we also have the ng-submit event that is actually binded to the onLogin method, that if this form is actually being submitted, then this method shall be actually invoked. So we have our method over here called inside the click event of our button. So our button, by the way, is disabled in cases where the form is not valid, or maybe there's one field that is actually not filled. So that's it for our login component over here. The logout just operates on a similar principle. You can see we have this show success stories, just the same things. So I'll just quickly go ahead and now test all this stuff. So let us first of all run the ng-serve. Sorry, let me just delete this and then open a new terminal. Just a minute. So our working directory, first of all, we have that cd. Okay, sorry. Front end, sorry. Cd into some typo there. So now we are inside, so it's the ng-serve. Let's give it some few seconds. Okay, the server is now up and running. So now I'll now go ahead and check our browser. So let me try accessing. Okay, now you can see we have our simple form over here. I went ahead and now registered one user by the name Peter Evans, my name actually, and then now password. Let me just put in the password. So that's it. And if you try logging in, we are getting the login fail. Please try again. So that is now the snack bar that I was telling you about. Let us just inspect this and see what's really happening. If you try logging again, you see this. Okay, inside the console. Oh, we have the connection refused. That technically means that we have not started up the server. So back into our project PyCharm. Just close this. So let me just run the server. Okay, now the server is also now up and running in our backend. So back here, just clear this as well as also clear this. Then try that out. Okay, now you can see the logged in successfully. So this is the action. And now you can see we can now log out. So let us just go ahead and check inside our local storage. Okay, you can see now we have a key, the token, as well as also now the value of that string. So if we log out, you see the key is now being deleted and we are now redirected back to the login page. So we also have other URLs like the register. Just click on it. Yeah, you can see now we have our register form, but for now I won't really go into that because of time. So back in our login over here, or maybe if the person is now logged out, let me just try accessing the logout. Yeah, you can see if you try accessing the logout page, just back a little bit, logout page over here, you see it's redirecting back to the login. So again, Peter Evans over there. Okay, now after logging in, you can see now we have the token once more. So let me just try accessing, let's say, the register page. You can see now you cannot access the register page. And so that marks the end of this tutorial. If you find it helpful, please consider liking, subscribing, as well as also sharing. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.